it was Christmas. I went downstairs to check under the Christmas tree and boom, there it was, a brand new 3DS, which I still have to this day, by the way. I remember unboxing it and setting it up and being so excited about it. Little did I know, soon enough, I would be playing my favorite Pokemon game of all time, Pokemon X and Y. Before we get into why I love this game, I would like to say that I will be talking also about what the game could have done better, and not only glazing it. Anyway, let me start by telling you a bit about my relationship with this game. Based on what I said, you might think that Pokemon X and Y were the first Pokemon games I played, but it was actually Pokemon Black and White, which I never finished when I was young because it was too difficult, and then I traded that cartridge for the game Nintendogs. I know, very stupid, but I was like 9 years old and I still regret it to this day. Now, Black and White came out in 2011 and Pokemon X and Y in 2013, where I was a bit older and could now understand basic English. Oh, and of course, I could save my games now, because before I couldn't read English, so I always had to replay all of my games since I didn't know what the word save is or what a save file is. I dreaded it even as a kid. Anyway, I remember talking to my friend at school at the time about how I'm going to get the new Pokemon game, and he was like, no way, me too. So we decided to get different versions of the game. I went with Pokemon X and he went with Pokemon Y. We had so much fun looking at the graphics and the Pokemon and talking about what Pokemon we were gonna add on our teams. Obviously, I went with the water type starter, Froakie, because I loved its ninja theme, and my friend went with the fire type starter, Fennekin. I remember struggling at the start of the game, especially at the first gym, since I only had a Froakie and a Fletchling, which was severely underleveled. Eventually, of course, I beat the gym, but not long after I got stuck at the Furfrou puzzle. I know it's not a hard puzzle, but I was a kid and again barely understood English at the time, so my friend surprisingly had the same issue. So he asked his aunt to do the puzzle for him. When I told him, he offered to tell his aunt to beat it for me too. And so I gave him my game, and a day later he came to me with a Furfrou puzzle done. Me and my friend both beat the game and the post story. So with nothing left to do, we spent all of our time trading and battling each other or watching other people on YouTube play the game. Although the stuff I talked about is probably the normal experience as a kid, to me those memories are still really special. But with that out the way, let's get into the actual video. So let's begin by talking about what made the game stand out in the franchise and the hype of it back then. Now, getting into the actual meat and potatoes, let's start with the biggest change, which is the 3D graphics. All other mainline Pokemon games before this were 2D sprites, which were definitely cool and good looking for 2D, but 3D made the game much more realistic looking, and it was praised for it being 3D since it felt like we're one step closer to Pokemon being real, which I think it was the dream of any kid that grew up with it. This great graphical shift shook the Pokemon space, and the excitement and hype for it were so real. But some older fans of the games felt that this new 3D style would impact the game's charm, since there were debates about how 3D models could lose their personality and expressiveness of sprites. Other fans thought that the graphics looked too simple or plasticky, and others discussed how the hardware might or might not be able to handle so many Pokemon in 3D. But overall, most people describe this shift to 3D like childhood dreams coming true. Now, I think Pokemon X and Y have the best 3D graphics out of any 3D Pokemon game. The reason is because they did the art style right. The characters, silhouettes, and the buildings to the nature and the Pokemon was done perfectly, and in this semi-chibi art style that didn't suck and actually felt alive and unique, unlike another Pokemon game. To me, this art style is super unique since no other Pokemon game truly implemented it, and it fits the 3DS perfectly. It was not boring or too minimalistic or too corporate feeling. It felt like a genuinely new art style for the series. I mean, here, look at some pictures and tell me this isn't uniquely pretty and fits the 3DS as a style perfectly. Overall, I'd give the art style a 9 out of 10. Some of the Pokemon sprites could have looked a little bit better, but overall, it is great. Global release. Pokemon X and Y were the first Pokemon games to be released internationally at the same time, compared to before, where there were a couple months delay before a game would go international, so players in Japan, for example, would have more time with the game. To be more specific, Pokemon games were released in Japan first, followed by localized versions in other regions like Europe and North America at later dates. This led to complaints from fans, particularly in Europe. who felt they were missing out on the initial excitement and experiencing spoilers due to the staggered release. While I know this isn't something directly related to the gameplay, I still think it's important to mention since it shows the shift that changed the release of Pokemon games, since now all of them are released globally at the same time. With the 3D graphics, Game Freak could finally experiment with character customization. Even though the character customization was just hair, skin tone, shirt, pants, socks and shoes, it was definitely an upgrade from the previous games where you couldn't change at all how your character looks. Which is funny to think about because fans have been asking for character customization since Pokemon Gold and Silver. So when they saw that you could change pretty much everything on your character, it made them feel like Game Freak truly listened. This change mattered a lot to people since it made them feel more connected to their character instead of playing as the same generic kid like previous titles. The French-inspired Kalos setting made customization feel like part of the theme, since Kalos is based around France, specifically Paris. So this was the perfect time and setting for Game Freak to add a customization option in the game. Some fans complained about having too few options, especially for the male character, but overall this change was received positively. I spent some time making my character too, even though you can't see it in the character in the gameplay because it's from another save file. This change was received so positively that it influenced the next generation of games, and from this game and after, character customization became the norm. Let's talk a bit about the online features this game introduced. PSS, which stands for Player Search System, put your friends and passerbys right on the touchscreen, making it fast to interact with anyone. Compared to before, where you had to go through multiple menus, friend codes and clunky interfaces, the PSS system simplified things. So it was a great change that was perceived positively by fans since it allowed for instant battles and Pokemon trades, and seeing other players online made the world feel more alive and gave the game an MMO-like feel. And to be honest, it was the most social Pokemon ever felt. Wonder Trade was another online mechanic introduced in this generation, which allowed players to trade a Pokemon with another random person in the world. So essentially, both people in the trade had no idea what they were getting, which was really fun to do because some people were giving away shinies or even their legendaries. A lot of them were probably hacked. This feature felt revolutionary at the time, and fans loved it because the unpredictability of what you were going to get felt exciting, so it made it really addictive. But of course, some players were worried that Wonder Trade would flood the game with hacked or cloned Pokemon, which did happen, but the novelty outweighed the problem for most. But once again, this feature was praised a lot and was added to future games. Even people who didn't like the game praised it for this feature and the general ease of use that online features had. Of course, personally, I loved this feature and I did so many Wonder Trades after I beat the game because I found it so fun and exciting, which probably means I should not gamble. Lastly, O-Powers. O-Powers are abilities that provide temporary benefits to the player and their Pokemon, such as increased experience points, easier wild Pokemon captures, or higher prize money. And they can be shared with friends over the internet or Street Pass. These powers cost energy that recharges over time and can be leveled up by frequent use. With higher levels providing stronger effects, I don't think I used this feature much, nor did my friends, but I decided to mention it since it was a new feature. Amy, I don't know what this feature is called if I'm being honest, but when it came to the Pokemon Amy feature, I loved it personally. It allowed for a deeper connection with your Pokemon and it let you see them play around, and it made it generally fun to interact with them and made the Pokemon feel like a little more than just pixels on a screen. For the first time, you could pet, feed and interact directly with your Pokemon, seeing their 3D models up close. People loved this feature and it was embraced positively since it made the Pokemon feel like actual companions. It also helped with competitive Pokemon. High affection gave in battle perks such as surviving hits on 1 HP, shaking off status, earning more experience. And I remember always loving the fact that my Pokemon would tank a lethal hit so I wouldn't feel sad. That made battles more exciting for me. The positive perception of this feature allowed it to be integrated in later games such as Sun and Moon and Sword and Shield. And now the part you were all probably waiting for, Mega Evolutions. A brand new battle mechanic that changed the meta and let old Pokemon shine again. Next to the 3D graphics, this was the other big reason people were excited about the games. There are 28 Mega Evolutions in the game, and they all look amazing. Here are some of my favorites. The general view on Megas was perceived with excitement by fans from all over the world. Many of them saw it as the most exciting mechanic since Pokemon breeding from Gen 2. And of course, they loved that older Pokemon such as Mawile, Ampharos and Kangaskhan were suddenly viable in battle again. The flashy transformation sequences and battle power boost made them feel epic, especially Mega Charizard X, which instantly became a fan favorite. Megas were seen as a chance for Game Freak to revisit old Pokemon and give them fresh, creative designs that would also make them competitively viable again. Some like Mega Lucario, Mega Gardevoir, and Mega Absol were praised for looking like ultimate forms of their base Pokemon, which, I mean, just look at them. Megas made some Pokemon top tier threats in competitive play. This was exciting for battlers but also raised concerns about balance, especially with Pokemon like Mega Kangaskhan dominating early metas. Smogon and other battle communities started debating bans almost immediately. Some players felt Megas were gimmicky or unnecessary, worried they might replace regular evolutions in the future. A few disliked that Mega Evolutions was temporary, it wasn't a permanent new form like past evolutions. I was one of those people because I loved the mechanic and I wish it stayed around forever. In the short term, fans widely loved Mega Evolutions, and it became a defining feature of Gen 6. In the long run, some were sad when later generations like Sword and Shield and onward removed Megas entirely, feeling they were the most exciting battle mechanic the series had added in years, which I definitely agree with because I will not lie, Z's and terastallization are cool and all, but they don't hold a candle to the coolness of Mega Evolutions in my opinion. Exploration. I think it goes without saying that the exploration in this game felt great overall. Maybe a little linear at times, but overall it was great. The jump to 3D made towns, routes, and landmarks feel more immersive. Walking through Lumiose City's crowded streets, visiting cafes, and seeing camera shifts in certain locations like the Prism Tower or the Reflection Cave was really cool, which I think this shows that again, Game Freak took their time to experiment with the things they added, cause stuff like the Reflection Cave was something you couldn't really do on 2D, and it's something that wasn't necessary but they did anyways. A feature like that would have been more likely to exist for something like a Pokemon gym and not a cave. The Kalos region's French-inspired design, varied biomes, and multiple optional towns gave it a distinct personality, and roller skates and diagonal movement were welcomed for smoother traversal. For many players, like myself, seeing familiar Pokemon habitats in 3D felt like the anime come to life. Routes had more depth in visuals, cliffs, rivers, and bridges were no longer just flat tiles. However, some longtime fans felt that despite the 3D visuals, the region's layout was very straightforward, with fewer complex dungeons or maze-like routes compared to earlier generations, which, as I said at the start of this segment, the game did feel a little linear at times. Many caves and forests were relatively short, and HM-based backtracking was minimal, making exploration feel less puzzle-driven. Lumiose City, while impressive, confused some players at launch because of its circular design and repetitive-looking streets, which, oh boy, did the little 10-year-old me take some time to get used to that. But even so, the exploration was great, and I'd say that the reason it was somewhat linear was that was Game Freak's first time working with 3D graphics, so they probably put some limitations on themselves on that part. Or maybe I'm wrong and they just decided that for some other reason. Either way, I always enjoyed traversing through the areas. Their linearity made it feel more homey to me, like walking the streets of your city or neighborhood, which you know like the back of your palm. So every time I go back to replay the game, I'm never lost. Something I didn't mention so far are the new Pokemon that were added. Game Freak added 72 new Pokemon species alongside a new typing, the Fairy type, which changed the game quite a bit. In Gen 5, Dragon types were extremely dominant in both casual and competitive play. Pokemon like Garchomp, Salamence, Dragonite, and Hydreigon were really strong, so when Game Freak announced that Fairy was immune to Dragon, fans saw it as a deliberate balance fix, and many competitive players welcomed it. And with this new type, Game Freak announced that some older Pokemon will have this type, essentially reworking them a bit. Pokemon like Gardevoir, Mawile, and Azumarill will become Fairy types, which was met with a lot of hype, especially since it gave some forgotten Pokemon new relevance. Sylveon, the new evolution, became a mascot for the type and generated a ton of fanart and speculation before release. Some fans didn't understand what a Fairy type would look like. Early guesses leaned toward weak, cutesy designs, so people were surprised to see tough or mischievous fairies like Mawile and Granbull. Others worried it was just a pink Pokemon type, though the actual roster showed more variety. There was early anxiety that Fairy might be too strong, since it not only countered Dragon, but also resisted fighting and dark, while having few weaknesses, those being poison and steel. This turned out to be partially true in the early X and Y meta, where Fairy quickly became a staple defensive type, but when it came to overall perception, most fans saw Fairy as a smart addition that kept the type chart fresh without breaking it. The decision to retroactively add Fairy to old Pokemon gave the type immediate depth instead of starting from scratch, and as a Mawile fan, I'm glad it's a Fairy Steel type. It fits it much better than being pure Steel. Now let's talk about the new Pokemon and their designs. I'd like to list some of my favorites, so let's start with Vivillon, a bug-type Pokemon that is often overlooked as just another butterfly Pokemon, which I get it. After all, it is just a butterfly. However, Vivillon has a unique mechanic, that being its varied wing patterns, which are influenced by the real-world geographic location. The patterns themselves resemble pixel art, with a square shape and unique designs linked to different regions. Vivillon's design incorporates these elements with the Pokemon's wings showcasing 18 distinct patterns, each tied to a specific geographic area and climate. Although this mechanic doesn't really add anything to gameplay, it's really cool to see, because let's say you wonder traded a Pokemon and you got a Scatterbug or Spewba. This could evolve into a pattern depending on where they came from, which I find really neat and cool. Another Pokemon that I'd like to talk about, which in my opinion should have gotten way more attention and a Mega, and should have been the region's defining Pokemon, is Furfrou. Let me explain. You see, Furfrou is based on the real-life species of dog, the poodle. Even though the dog originates from Germany, it was most popular in France, and the French were known about their love for the breed, making it the perfect candidate for being the region's symbol. That, and the fact that they put another mechanic in the game just for this Pokemon. That being that they added a Furfrou Salon to give your Furfrou unique styles, which look really cool. I think Game Freak had more in mind when it came to this Pokemon, but for some reason they didn't add more of it. And when the new Pokemon ZA games were announced, I really hoped that Furfrou would get the attention it deserves, but nothing new was announced for it. No Mega, no new features for it, and no integral part in the story, unfortunately. The last Pokemon I want to talk about is Aegislash. This is another Pokemon that fits this location design. Aegislash is based on a possessed sword and shield, a common motif in various mythologies, with its name likely deriving from Aegis, which means the shield of Zeus, and Slash. What I'm about to say might be a bit of a reach, but I think they added this Pokemon in mind of France's rich history and strong legacy in sword fighting, particularly in the evolution of fencing from the 17th century onwards, which saw the development of techniques and the creation of training tools like the modern foil. The culture of dueling was widespread in France, and French fencing masters established a dominant style that spread across Europe and influenced the development of the sport globally. Which, if this is true, then they should have made the Pokemon into a foil or a rapier. Either way, the Pokemon is still unique due to its ability named Stance Change, which can be activated by using an attack to change into its blade form. In order for it to change back, Aegislash must use its signature move, King's Shield, to change it back to its shield form, which is really unique, and combine that with its Ghost Steel typing, you get a really new and unique Pokemon. In Pokemon X and Y, the player starts an adventure in the Kalos region, meets friends, and learns about the new Mega Evolution phenomenon from Professor Sycamore. The journey involves battling gym leaders, but it's also a fight against the villainous Team Flare, who seek to use a revived 3,000-year-old ultimate weapon to destroy the world. The player must ultimately stop Team Flare, rescue the legendary Pokemon, and become the new champion of the Kalos region. This is the plot of the game, and it's not that different from older games. The friendship group dynamic was cool and was different from previous generations. Instead of having one person as your rival, now it was 4 other people, those being Shauna, Trevor, Tierno, and Serena. This gave the adventure a more social feel. However, the large friend group, while refreshing, didn't get much character development beyond surface quirks. The war backstory with AZ and the ultimate weapon was seen as surprisingly dark for Pokemon, adding a layer of historical mystery to Kalos. Lysandra's motivation, wanting to preserve beauty by wiping out most of the population, was at least an attempt at a more philosophical villain compared to earlier generations. But this plot had its issues, such as pacing and depth. Many felt that the main plot was barely integrated into the gameplay. Lysandra and Team Flare appear suddenly late in the game with little build-up, then disappear after their defeat. The evil team's goals came across as cartoonishly abrupt to some, and their grunts lacked the memorable personality of Team Rocket, Aqua, or Galactic. The post-game cutscene with AZ reuniting with Floette was widely praised as emotional and one of the series' most touching moments. Some players, however, thought it felt disconnected from the main journey since AZ barely interacts with you until the finale, which, to give some credit to Game Freak when it comes to this, with the new ZA games it looks like they will touch more on AZ and his Floette, which is cool to see. Compared to Black and White, which had a strong and morally complex narrative, X and Y's story felt light. Many described it as fun but forgettable. The charm came more from Kalos' world design and mechanics than the actual plot, which unfortunately stands true. There's really not much to write home about or remember when it comes to the story, but hey, at least the character designs look cool. Overall, casual players often didn't mind the lighter story and enjoyed the upbeat tone and world building. The gym leaders of this generation have some of my favorite designs, especially Valerie, Olympia, and Ramos. Kalos is fashion and France inspired, so many leaders had stylish or quirky aesthetics, these three being the ones that would showcase it the most in my opinion. Valerie was popular for her elegant design and being the first fairy-type gym leader. Even Corina, who has a much simpler design, stood out for her roller skater motif and the fact she introduced Omega Evolution in the story. Even Clement, who in my opinion was the most basic looking, was still memorable thanks to his inventions and his role in the Pokemon anime. The Lumious Gym's elevator quiz, Corina's roller skating gym, and Clement's gym machine puzzles were fun and thematic, and the 3D graphics helped make them more elaborate than previous generations. Their designs aside, they were easy overall, since X and Y are considered some of the easiest games in the series. That, and the fact that they weren't as integrated in the story, made them a little forgettable. They could have leaned a little more in the French theme with them, but they didn't. I love the gym leaders and their designs, even with these small flaws. Although the Elite Four in this game was relatively easy, I think it's safe to say that they had some of the best designs out of any Elite Four before them. What I really liked about them were the rooms each one had, reflecting their type, even though something similar was done in Pokemon Black and White. Something about this game and its 3D graphics made the setting more interesting to me, and I remember liking specifically and still like to this day, Cyborg's room. Something about the water element all around us made it so much more interesting to me. But when we talk design specifically for their characters, they are perfect. They all reflect their typing perfectly. For example, Malva's pink hair combined with her fiery red glasses and red pants along with her ill-tempered and self-absorbed personality and demeanor really sets the tone for a fire-type gym leader. Take Cybolt for example as well. His elegant outfit and almost marble-like design really fits his theme as a water-type gym leader. And of course, his personality matches these two by being solitary, standoffish, and very contemplative, intelligent, and wise person. Wigstrom's armor shows off his steel-type theme and kind of matches his ace, that being Aegislash. Combine that with his noble and kind traits, his theme is perfect for how he is designed, since he is a knight, which combined with the above make him a perfect fit for his role. Drasna is the only one that feels a bit off to me. Her design is great. She has those big tusks, bones, whatever they are. They match her dragon typing well, since she has this more tribal aesthetic, matching Tales of Old when it comes to dragons. But her personality is where I'm thrown off a bit. She's a calm individual with a very gentle and welcoming disposition, which isn't bad, but I don't think it matches a dragon type trainer that much. Usually a dragon type trainer is someone more fierce and fiery, which, by the way, don't get me wrong, her character and design isn't bad, and it's definitely a breath of fresh air, compared to other dragon type gym leaders at least. But with how she is, you'd expect her to have something like a Dragonite rather than a Dragalge. But overall, I like her design. The champion has this beautiful room that screams fairy type, which is ironic since she only has one, that being her ace, Gardevoir. Which, I don't know why, but when I think of Mega Gardevoir, I think of Diantha immediately. Their designs match so well, and the fact that they communicate telepathically makes it even better and more memorable. Diantha's design is simple yet elegant, matching her personality of being a graceful, intelligent, and kind person. Which, fun enough, is just like Gardevoir, being a kind, empathetic, and protective Pokemon. And I think the fact that they are so close in design and character is awesome. I love the Elite Four of this generation, and to this day they remain my favorite Elite Four. Something about them and their designs speak to me so much. Since Red and Blue, movement had always been locked to a 4-direction grid. Being able to move diagonally in X and Y felt like a natural upgrade to match the new 3D world. It made exploration feel smoother and more modern. This allowed for a movement feature that we didn't get before or after this game, that being roller skating, which I loved personally. It's a fun feature that allows for better, faster movement without needing a bike, even though we get one in the game at some point. Doing tricks and grinding on rails was fun. It also helped with egg hatching and shiny hunting, because you didn't need to pull out your bike. Yes, there were times where it felt a little clunky as a feature, but overall it was a great new addition. And it matches the Kalos' theme perfectly, since roller skating is really popular in France and Paris, which is the city Kalos is based on. So it's a great new feature to add just for this reason alone. It made movement refreshing and changed the usual bike and running movement options. The post-game content was generally seen as one of the weakest parts of the generation, even among fans who loved the main adventure. After defeating the champion, there was little to do besides a few small activities. Compared to previous games, it lacked a lot of features such as the Battle Frontier or the more extensive post-game stories in previous generations. But something like Looker Beru side quest in Lumio City was widely praised for being surprisingly engaging and giving more life to the city. By the way, I remember loving this quest as a kid, since it felt a bit more challenging. Friend Safari was another post-game feature that became a popular feature for hunting Pokemon with hidden abilities and good IVs, even though nowadays we kind of left something like Pokemon Safari in the past, since with the newer Pokemon games we are moving towards a more open world experience, which would probably lead to no more Pokemon Safaris. Battle Maison provided a battle facility, though many thought it was a downgrade from previous battle towers and subways, and we also had to hunt the post-game legendaries, which was fun itself. I remember as a kid being annoyed by it because I didn't get how the system worked. Shiny hunting was possible but easier due to Friend Safari odds, which I was a big fan of since I liked shinies but hated how long it would take to get one in older generations. In X and Y, they sped it up quite a bit. Although the post-game wasn't bad, it was relatively short, which left a lot of people wanting more, including myself. Lastly, I wanted to talk about the music of these games, which you've been hearing all this time by watching this video. I love the music of these games, and they don't get enough praise for their soundtracks. And it's funny to think that it's this underrated, since it's the first Pokemon game that allowed Game Freak to step up from the GBA and DS's limited sound. Some of the tracks that I really like are the Gym Leader Battle theme, Champion Diantha's theme, Team Flare Battle theme, Kalos Wild Battle theme, Snowbell City, and AZ's theme. Even though some of the music can be labeled repetitive, I think it's great overall, especially when you think about how this was the first time Game Freak changed their music, so it was a big step for them too. I love these games, and they are definitely my favorite Pokemon games. What makes them special to me is everything I listed above, but the main thing is just the vibe of these games is not a corporate chibi vibe. It's a unique 3D art style that genuinely feels alive, and the Megas too. If I had to summarize it in a sentence, is that these games might not be perfect, but to me they are. They shaped my childhood memories, and they brought Pokemon in my life in a much more exciting and permanent way, that even now, at 21, I'm still in love with the series. I hope that the ZA games will live up to the originals so I can relive that excitement one more time.